The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the dense forest, when a large white dog found himself tied to a tree, alone. He couldn't understand why his owner had left him there. Only hours before, he'd been happily trotting by his side, a sense of security grounding him as they walked through the familiar trails. The man had spoken softly, his voice low and calm, as he petted the dog's head. Then he'd pulled out a thick rope and tied it securely around his neck, fastening it tightly to the trunk of a sturdy tree. At first, the dog thought it was just a game, a temporary hold. Maybe his owner was just stepping away for a moment, like the times he'd left him tied outside a shop or near the car. But as the minutes dragged into hours and darkness began to fall, a cold dread settled over the dog's heart. He whined softly, his deep, expressive eyes searching the shadows for any sign of the familiar figure. He barked, a hopeful, pleading sound that echoed off the trees and faded into the vast silence. But no one answered. The forest grew darker, and the sounds around him became stranger, more foreboding. He could hear the rustle of leaves, the snapping of twigs, and the distant calls of unseen animals. Each sound made his fur bristle, his body tensing instinctively. In his world, humans had always been a source of warmth and companionship. They provided food, shelter, and a sense of belonging. Now, bound to a tree and left in the wilderness, he felt exposed, vulnerable, in a way he'd never experienced before. His throat grew parched as he barked and barked, each call carrying a sense of desperation, echoing deeper into the woods. His legs grew tired from standing guard, the tension from being tethered to the tree creating aches in his shoulders and back. It was an unnatural position, and as he shifted to lie down, he glanced toward the small, vulnerable shapes curled up at his side, his puppies. Each one had a unique coat, some spotted with darker patches, others resembling his light fur. They were only weeks old, still in that stage where they relied on their mother or, in her absence, him. They whimpered softly, confused and frightened by the new surroundings, instinctively snuggling close to their father for warmth. He licked their heads gently, his rough tongue soothing them as best he could, a soft whine escaping him as he nuzzled them close. The dog felt an overwhelming wave of responsibility. He couldn't leave his puppies. He wouldn't, even if he somehow managed to slip out of his bindings. But he had no food, no water, and as the forest grew darker, he understood that they might not make it through the night if no help arrived. He gazed up at the sky, where the first stars were beginning to twinkle, his heart heavy with the weight of his duty to his little family. Then came the faint sound of movement, a low rustling that seemed to grow closer with each passing second. The dog's ears perked up, his muscles tensing as he strained to see through the dim light. Emerging from the shadows, their silhouettes barely distinguishable from the trees or wolves. His heart pounded. Instinctively, he positioned himself between his puppies and the approaching figures, lowering his head in a defensive stance. The wolves paused a few feet away, their eyes glinting with a mixture of curiosity and calculation as they observed the strange scene. They had likely been drawn by the scent of something new and vulnerable in their territory. And they prowled closer, with the cautious steps of experienced hunters. The dog's mind raced. He had heard stories, or at least sensed through instinct, of the wild cousins that roamed forests, powerful and untamed. Wolves were known for their pack mentality, their relentless loyalty to one another. Yet they were still predators, and he was now trapped within their domain. Bound to the tree, he couldn't flee. He couldn't fight properly if they chose to attack. He was at their mercy. But despite the fear coursing through him, he stood his ground, planting his paws firmly into the forest floor and letting out a low, rumbling growl. A warning, a promise that he would defend his puppies to his last breath. The lead wolf tilted its head, seeming almost puzzled by the dog's defiance. They locked eyes, and in that moment, an understanding seemed to pass between them. The dog held his gaze, his posture unwavering. The lead wolf let out a soft huff, then slowly backed away, a signal to the others. The wolves lingered for a moment longer, their eyes still fixed on the dog and his puppies. But instead of lunging, instead of asserting their dominance as he feared, they turned and faded back into the shadows, as silently as they had come. The dog's heart hammered in his chest both from relief and residual fear. He collapsed to his haunches, a quiet whine escaping him as he nudged each of his puppies, reassuring them as much as himself that they were safe, at least for now. As the night grew darker, he kept a vigilant watch, his body forming a protective barrier around his puppies. Despite his exhaustion, he refused to sleep, his ears twitching at every small sound, his nose picking up every unfamiliar scent. He knew he had to be ready for anything. The forest was alive with dangers, and yet, in the face of each threat, his resolve only grew stronger. In those hours before dawn, he felt something shift within him, a steely determination born of desperation and love. The gentle companionship he once knew had been replaced by a fierce instinct to survive. He wasn't just a pet anymore. He was a protector, a guardian, and the only family his puppies had left. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, casting a pale glow over the forest floor, the dog took a deep, steadying breath. He knew that the night was only the beginning. His survival, and that of his puppies, would depend not just on the mercy of strangers, but on his own strength, his own will to endure. And so, as the sun began to rise, he braced himself for whatever challenges lay ahead, his heart carrying the weight of the past, yet filled with the quiet courage of one who has found something to fight for. As dawn's light seeped into the forest, casting gentle rays through the trees, the dog and his puppies stirred. The long, tense night had left them exhausted, but the morning brought a faint glimmer of hope. The dog strained against the rope, his muscles tense and aching from hours of standing guard. His throat felt dry and his stomach growled, but he pushed his discomfort aside, focusing solely on the needs of his puppies. They wriggled beside him, their tiny bodies huddled close, eyes still shut to the world. He nudged each of them, encouraging them to wake, and they responded with soft whimpers, stretching their small paws and snuggling into his fur. He licked them gently, his touch as close to an embrace as he could manage. His heart ached with the knowledge that he couldn't provide for them as he normally would. He was their only protector, yet here he was, bound and helpless, unable to even search for food or water. The feeling of helplessness gnawed at him, sharper than any hunger pang. Suddenly, the faint sound of footsteps reached his ears, a crunching of leaves and snapping of twigs that made him tense immediately. His ears perked, and he shifted his gaze toward the approaching sound, his eyes narrowing. This time, it wasn't wolves emerging from the shadows, but something else. Two figures moving carefully through the forest. They were humans, a man and a woman, both wearing hiking gear and carrying backpacks. They seemed cautious, as though they, too, were wary of the dangers hidden in the forest. The dog's heart raced with a mixture of hope and fear. On one hand, humans meant food, water, perhaps even rescue. But on the other, he remembered the betrayal he'd felt the day before, abandoned by the very people he had trusted. Could he trust these strangers, or would they leave him and his puppies to face the forest's dangers alone? The couple moved closer, and the woman gasped when she saw him tied to the tree, her hand covering her mouth. "Look at him," she whispered, her voice filled with empathy. "And, are those puppies?" The man nodded, his expression serious. "Someone just left them here. They're defenseless." He approached slowly, his movements deliberate and calm, trying not to startle the dog. But the dog growled softly, baring his teeth, a warning, a reminder that he was still on guard, that he wouldn't let anyone harm his puppies. The woman crouched down a few feet away, her eyes soft and gentle as she spoke in a soothing tone. "Hey, boy. It's okay. We're here to help you." She extended her hand, palm facing upward, allowing him to sniff her scent from a safe distance. The dog watched her warily, his instincts in conflict with the glimmer of trust he felt growing in his heart. There was something in her voice that reminded him of his previous life, a kindness he hadn't felt since being abandoned. After a moment, the dog leaned forward slightly, his nose twitching as he took in her scent. It was gentle, calming, like a memory of a safer time. Sensing his tentative acceptance, the woman slowly reached into her backpack, pulling out a water bottle and a small bowl. She poured some water into the bowl and slid it toward him, keeping her movements slow and non-threatening. "Here, you must be thirsty," she murmured. The dog hesitated, glancing between her and the bowl, but his thirst overpowered his caution. He lowered his head, lapping up the water gratefully, each sip soothing the dryness in his throat. The puppies, sensing the commotion, began to squirm and whine, and the woman's gaze softened further as she noticed them nestled against his side. "Oh, they're so young," she whispered, turning to her companion. "We can't leave them here." The man nodded, his expression resolute. "We won't, but we have to be careful. He's scared, and he doesn't know us." The woman nodded in agreement, then extended her hand again, this time closer to the rope that bound him to the tree. "I'm going to untie you, okay?" she said softly, meeting the dog's eyes as if to seek his permission. The dog held her gaze, his eyes a mixture of caution and curiosity, but he didn't growl this time. He seemed to understand her intentions, sensing the sincerity in her gaze. Slowly, she loosened the rope, her fingers moving deftly as she worked to free him. The dog felt the tension around his neck release, the oppressive weight of the rope lifting. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, he could move freely. He stretched his legs, shaking out the stiffness, but his gaze never left the woman, his eyes questioning, as if to ask, "What now?" The man reached into his own bag, pulling out a small sandwich. He tore off a piece and offered it to the dog, who sniffed it cautiously before taking it, chewing slowly as he gauged their intentions. The man then broke off smaller pieces, setting them in front of each puppy, who pounced on the food, their tiny mouths eager for sustenance. The couple watched the small family with a mix of relief and sadness. They could see the exhaustion in the dog's eyes, the lingering fear that hadn't yet left his gaze. He had survived a night of terror, facing wolves and the harsh elements, and now he was left with only his instincts to guide him. "We should take them with us," the woman said, her tone firm. "We can't leave them out here. They wouldn't survive another night." The dog's ears perked up, understanding only a fraction of their words but sensing their intentions. The woman reached out her hand again, but this time she let it rest on his head, scratching behind his ears gently. The touch was comforting, reminding him of the life he had known before all of this, before the abandonment, before the struggle for survival. He felt a flicker of trust, a small warmth that began to thaw the cold wall around his heart. "Come on, boy," the woman said softly, her voice a gentle invitation. "We're going to get you and your babies somewhere safe." The dog took a deep breath, then stood up, looking down at his puppies, who were licking the last crumbs from the forest floor. He nudged them gently, guiding them to follow the humans. He didn't know what awaited him, but a part of him, a part that still longed for companionship and care, told him to trust these strangers. With a final glance at the tree where he'd been tied, he took a step forward, his puppies following closely by his side. The man and woman led the way, their voices soft and reassuring as they spoke to him, their tone a lullaby of safety and hope. The dog felt his heart lift, just a little, as he followed them out of the forest, away from the place that had been a prison, toward a future that held the promise of a new beginning. As they walked, he stayed close, keeping his puppies between him and the humans, a silent protector, even as he placed his trust in these kind strangers. And with each step, he felt the weight of his past begin to lift, replaced by the faint, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, he and his puppies would finally find the home they deserved. As they emerged from the forest, the dog glanced back at the trees, their dark, looming presence fading behind him. The memories of that night, its dangers, its fears, still lingered in his mind. But with each step, he could feel the weight of those memories ease. He was no longer bound, no longer surrounded by threats. Ahead of him was a narrow dirt path that led to something unknown, yet promising. His puppies trotted along by his side, their tiny paws pattering on the path, blissfully unaware of the gravity of their journey. The couple led them toward a modest house nestled at the edge of a small town, a place where tall grasses swayed in the gentle breeze and flowers bloomed in an untamed garden that seemed to welcome them. The house was quaint, its wooden walls painted in a soft shade of blue that had begun to fade with time. A garden gnome stood guard at the entrance, as if watching over everyone who passed through. The dog sniffed the air, catching the scents of fresh grass, flowers, and the distant smell of cooking food wafting from nearby homes. His stomach rumbled in response, a reminder of the hunger that had grown within him and his puppies. Despite his weariness, he felt a glimmer of excitement mixed with a lingering caution. This place was unfamiliar, but it radiated warmth. a stark contrast to the cold, isolating forest. The woman knelt down beside him, her face kind as she gestured toward the porch. "This is your new home," she said softly, her voice gentle but firm, as if making a promise. "We're going to take care of you." The dog's ears twitched as he listened, trying to decipher her tone more than her words. He could feel sincerity in her voice, the same warmth that had coaxed him to trust her back in the forest. She extended her hand, offering a small treat, which he took with a hesitant but grateful lick. The man opened the front door, holding it wide for them. "Come on in," he encouraged, nodding to the dog, who took a tentative step forward, his puppies following close behind him. Inside, the house was cozy, filled with soft, welcoming furniture. There was a faint smell of fresh bread and wood polish, comforting and safe. The floors were warm under his paws, a pleasant contrast to the cool, damp earth of the forest. The woman led them to a small, plush bed she had prepared in a corner of the living room. Blankets were neatly folded, and there was a soft pillow, as well as a bowl of fresh water and some food. She gestured to the bed, smiling gently. "This is for you and your babies. Rest here. You're safe now." He sniffed the blankets, their softness inviting him to settle down. One by one, his puppies crawled onto the bed, curling up together in a small, huddled mass of fur. Seeing them settle in so comfortably, their tiny breaths steadying, he felt a sense of relief wash over him. Slowly, he lowered himself beside them, his body relaxing against the plush surface. It had been so long since he felt safe enough to let his guard down. And now, for the first time since his abandonment, he allowed himself to close his eyes just for a moment. The woman sat nearby, watching over them with a look of tenderness. She gently stroked his head, her fingers running through his fur, and he leaned into her touch, savoring the affection that he'd missed for so long. Her hand was gentle, soothing, and he felt his trust in her grow bit by bit. As he drifted off, he could hear her speaking softly to the man. "We'll need to take them to the vet soon. Make sure they're healthy," she said. "And maybe we can keep them. They've been through so much already, they deserve a real home." The man nodded, his eyes softening as he watched the small family huddled together. "We can't abandon them," he replied. "They're part of our lives now." The dog's ears twitched at their words. He didn't fully understand, but he sensed their intent. They were offering him and his puppies a place not just for the night, but for the future. The warmth in their voices filled him with a calm he hadn't felt in a long time. And for the first time, he allowed himself to believe that this place could truly be his new home. Over the following days, the dog settled into a new routine, one that was both strange and comforting. Every morning, the woman would set out fresh food and water, gently calling him and his puppies to the kitchen. He watched with curiosity as she moved through her morning routine, her presence steady and reassuring. She would smile and talk to him, her voice a soothing melody that began to feel like home. The man, too, spent time with him, often sitting on the porch in the evenings, scratching the dog's ears and talking to him as if he were an old friend. There was a mutual respect between them, a quiet understanding that he was no longer just an animal, but part of their family. The puppies grew bolder with each day, their playful spirits brightening the household. They tumbled over each other, exploring every corner, their tiny paws leaving prints on the wooden floors. Their playful barks filled the house, a joyful sound that softened the edges of the couple's lives. The dog watched them with a mix of pride and relief, grateful that they were safe and thriving. One afternoon, the couple took them all out to the backyard, a fenced-in space where the puppies could play freely. The grass was cool beneath their paws, and flowers bloomed along the edges, filling the air with a sweet, earthy scent. The puppies scampered about, chasing each other, their barks and yips echoing in the yard. The dog trotted after them, keeping a close watch, but he felt a lightness in his steps, a newfound freedom he hadn't known before. As he looked up at the sky, the vast expanse of blue stretching above him, he realized that he was no longer a creature bound by fear or hunger. He was safe. His family was safe. The woman knelt down beside him, her hand resting gently on his back. "You're happy here, aren't you?" she murmured, as if sensing his peace. He looked up at her, his eyes bright with gratitude, and gave her hand a gentle lick. It was his silent way of saying, "Yes, I am." The dog felt a connection that went beyond mere survival. In this home with this family, he had found something precious, a bond that couldn't be broken, a place where he belonged. After a few days of peace and settling in, the couple decided it was time to take the dog and his puppies to the vet. The dog sensed their intention as they prepared for the outing. There was a bit more bustle than usual, and they brought out a small carrier for his puppies, talking to them in calming voices. The dog's ears perked as the man approached with a leash, speaking softly. "It's okay, boy," he murmured, his tone gentle yet reassuring. "We're going somewhere to make sure you and your little ones are healthy." Though a wave of apprehension passed over him, the dog didn't resist. Something in the man's steady presence and the woman's gentle encouragement made him feel safe. He watched as the puppies were carefully placed into the carrier, their curious little noses poking through the gaps as they looked around with wide eyes. The woman held the carrier in one hand, cradling it close, while the man led the dog out to their car, opening the back door. The dog hesitated, glancing back at the house with a mix of curiosity and unease. He wasn't used to these human routines, and the idea of being confined in a small space made him tense. But the woman knelt beside him, her hand resting on his back as she spoke in a soft voice. "We're here with you, and so are your babies. You're safe with us." Her words, though he didn't fully understand, had a soothing effect. With a deep breath, he climbed into the back seat, settling in beside the carrier where his puppies lay nestled together. The drive to the vet was quiet, save for the occasional whimper from one of the puppies. The dog kept his gaze fixed on them, his eyes soft with reassurance. The woman sat beside him, her presence steady and comforting as she occasionally reached over to pat his head. Each touch, gentle and warm, reminded him of the trust he was slowly building with these humans who had opened their home to him and his family. When they arrived at the vet's office, the unfamiliar smells and sounds flooded his senses. The scent of other animals, the quiet murmur of voices, the sterile tang of cleaning solutions, it all felt foreign and unsettling. His muscles tensed, and he instinctively positioned himself between the carrier and the unfamiliar surroundings, his protectiveness taking over. The woman sensed his unease and knelt down to his level, whispering soothing words as she stroked his fur. "It's okay, big guy. We're just here to make sure everything is all right. You're not alone." With gentle guidance, the couple led him into the examination room, where a kind-faced vet greeted them with a warm smile. She approached slowly, extending her hand for the dog to sniff, respecting his space. "You've been through a lot, haven't you?" she said softly, her gaze empathetic. The dog sniffed her hand cautiously, his eyes watching her every move. She took her time, speaking in a calm voice as she examined him, checking his ears, eyes, and paws with a gentle touch. He flinched slightly at first, but the warmth in her voice and the woman's comforting presence nearby kept him calm. Next, the vet examined each puppy, her face softening as she looked at their tiny forms. She took extra care with them, inspecting their health and marveling at their resilience. "They're healthy little ones," she assured the couple, who smiled with relief. "But I'd like to keep an eye on their growth over the next few months, just to make sure they're thriving." As she continued her examination, the vet glanced at the dog, her eyes filled with kindness. "He's an amazing father, you know," she remarked, watching the way he kept his gaze fixed on his puppies, even while being examined himself. Not many dogs would go through such lengths to protect their family. The couple exchanged glances, their smiles gentle. The woman knelt down beside the dog, meeting his eyes as she scratched his ears. "You're a hero, you know that?" she whispered. He didn't understand her words, but the softness in her eyes and the pride in her voice resonated with him. He pressed his head into her hand, a silent acknowledgement of her affection. Once the examination was complete, the vet recommended a few vaccines and a follow-up check for the puppies. "They're lucky to have found such a caring home," she said, handing the couple a small booklet with care instructions. "You're doing a wonderful thing, taking them all in." The man nodded, his voice filled with quiet determination. "They deserve a good life. We couldn't just leave them out there." With a last round of pats and soft words, they headed back to the car. The dog climbed in willingly this time, feeling a strange sense of relief. Though the vet's office had been unfamiliar and a bit unsettling, the way the couple had stayed close, watching over him and his puppies, filled him with a renewed sense of belonging. The drive home was peaceful, the puppies falling asleep in their carrier, and the dog resting his head on the seat beside them. The woman hummed a soft tune, her voice low and soothing, a melody that drifted through the car like a lullaby. He closed his eyes, allowing the hum of the engine and the gentle sway of the ride to lull him into a sense of calm he hadn't felt in a long time. When they arrived home, the couple gently carried the puppies back inside, placing them on their familiar bed with a few treats and toys. The dog patted over, settling beside them as they wriggled and nuzzled into his fur. He looked up at the couple, his eyes filled with gratitude. The woman crouched down beside him, her hand resting on his head. "You're safe here," she murmured, her voice a gentle promise. "This is your home now." The dog closed his eyes, letting her words wash over him. He still had flashes of the forest, the fear and the cold. But here, in this warm, quiet home, surrounded by his puppies and these kind humans, he felt those memories begin to fade, replaced by something he hadn't felt in a long time: peace. He knew that there might still be challenges ahead, moments of doubt or fear. But with each passing day, his trust in these humans grew, and his heart began to heal, bit by bit. This was his new life. A second chance for him and his puppies, and for the first time, he dared to believe that they were truly safe. As the days turned into weeks, the dog and his puppies fully embraced their new life. The house became their sanctuary, a place where they could roam freely and feel safe. Each morning, they woke up to the soft sunlight filtering through the windows and the gentle sounds of the couple moving about in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. The puppies grew stronger and more adventurous with each passing day. They tumbled over each other in endless play, their small barks and yips filling the house with a lively energy. Their personalities began to emerge. One was the bold explorer, always sniffing every corner and nudging doors open. Another was the playful instigator, always eager for a wrestling match with his siblings. And there was one, the smallest of the litter, who stayed close to the dog, watching his every move with a quiet curiosity. The couple, too, had come to love each of the puppies, giving them affectionate nicknames and showering them with attention. Every evening, they would sit on the floor with the puppies, laughing as the little ones clambered over their laps, tugging on their shoelaces or gnawing on fingers. The house was filled with warmth and laughter, a stark contrast to the silence and isolation that had once defined the dog's life. As for the dog, he was finally beginning to relax. The unease that had once haunted him, the memories of being left behind and struggling to survive, were fading. He watched over his puppies with a gentle pride, occasionally joining in their playful scuffles or gently nudging them back when they wandered too far. His life had taken on a rhythm he never thought possible, a rhythm of comfort, peace, and trust. One afternoon, while the puppies napped in a pile on their bed, the man decided it was time to introduce the dog to something new. "Come on, big guy," he said, holding a leash in his hand, his eyes glinting with excitement. "Let's go for a walk." The dog tilted his head, unsure at first. Walks had once meant survival, patrolling unfamiliar territory, or searching for food. But the man's enthusiasm and gentle encouragement were infectious. With a hesitant but trusting look, the dog allowed the man to clip the leash to his collar. They stepped out into the open air, the dog's nose twitching as he inhaled the fresh scents of the neighborhood: grass, flowers, the faint aroma of cooking from nearby houses. He trotted alongside the man, his eyes wide with curiosity as he took in the sights and sounds of this new world. The man led him down the quiet streets, greeting neighbors who admired the dog's size and gentle demeanor. "He's beautiful," one of them commented, reaching out to pet him. The dog tensed for a moment, but then relaxed under the man's reassuring presence. This wasn't like the dangerous encounters he'd known in the past. These humans were kind, their touch soft, and their voices friendly. As they walked, the dog felt a new sense of pride, like he belonged here, like he was a part of this community. The man's steady pace and gentle words as he occasionally patted the dog's head reinforced the bond growing between them. It was as if every step brought them closer, strengthening a trust that had once seemed impossible. After a long walk, They returned home, where the puppies greeted them with sleepy eyes and wagging tails. The dog settled back onto his bed, the comfort of home wrapping around him like a warm blanket. The man scratched his ears and whispered, "You did good today." The woman joined them, laughing as the puppies tumbled into her lap, pawing for attention. She looked at the dog with affection. "You're part of the family now," she said softly. "You and your babies." The dog leaned into her touch, feeling the truth in her words. This wasn't just a temporary refuge. This was his home, his family. And for the first time, he allowed himself to believe that it would last. One evening, as the family was settling in for the night, a sudden loud crash shattered the calm. The dog's ears perked up instantly, his instincts flaring as he leapt to his feet, positioning himself between his sleeping puppies and the source of the sound. The man and woman exchanged glances, their faces filled with surprise and concern as they hurried to the front door. The dog followed, his eyes alert, his muscles tense. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet, save for the rustling of leaves in the evening breeze. But something was off. He could sense it, a faint scent lingering in the air, something unfamiliar and unsettling. The couple opened the door to find their trash cans overturned, with garbage strewn across the front yard. A few steps away, a dark figure darted around the corner, barely visible in the dim streetlights. It was a stray dog, thin and ragged, with a wild look in its eyes as it pawed through the trash, desperate for food. The man sighed in relief, his tension easing. "It's just a stray," he murmured, glancing down at their own dog. "Nothing to worry about." But their dog didn't relax. He stood at the doorway, his posture firm, his gaze fixed on the stray. The sight of the dog, hungry, lost, searching for scraps in the darkness, stirred something deep within him. Memories of his own time in the wilderness flashed through his mind. The nights he'd spent scavenging, searching for anything to fill his empty stomach. He knew the fear, the loneliness that came with being abandoned and without a home. For a moment, he felt a tug at his heart. He took a step forward, his gaze softening as he looked at the stray dog. But then he felt a gentle hand on his head. The woman knelt beside him, her touch grounding him, reminding him of his present, of the home he now had. The warmth, the love, the safety. The stray caught his scent, pausing as it looked up, its eyes meeting his. There was a brief, silent exchange, a recognition between them, a shared understanding of what it meant to survive alone. But the stray's eyes soon turned wary, and it darted back into the shadows, disappearing into the night. The man closed the door, and the dog stayed by it for a moment longer, his thoughts a mix of gratitude and lingering empathy for the life he had left behind. He looked up at the couple, who were watching him with gentle smiles, understanding in their eyes. "You're safe now," the woman whispered, her hand resting on his back. "This is where you belong." With a final glance toward the door, the dog turned back, his heart at ease. The stray's fleeting presence had reminded him of how far he had come, from a life of survival to a life filled with love. And he knew that he would protect this new life with everything he had. That night, as he curled up with his puppies, he closed his eyes, feeling a deep sense of peace. He had found his place, and he was ready to defend it, to cherish it. This was his family now, and nothing could take that away. As the seasons changed, the dog's life settled into a peaceful rhythm. The puppies grew quickly, their small, wobbly steps becoming confident bounds as they explored the house and yard. Their personalities blossomed further. Each one had their quirks and favorite spots in the house. They became beloved members of the household, bringing laughter and warmth with every little antic. One sunny afternoon, the couple decided to spend the day in the backyard with the dogs. They laid out a blanket, bringing treats and toys to enjoy the afternoon together. The puppies chased each other through the grass, their joyful yips filling the air. The dog sat close to the couple, watching over his little ones, his gaze softened by happiness and contentment. The man chuckled as one of the puppies tumbled over, tripping on its own paws. "They're growing so fast," he said, reaching over to pat the dog's head. "You did a great job with them." The dog leaned into his touch, a low hum of satisfaction escaping him. He had done his best, and the puppies were thriving. Each day felt like a reward for all the hardships he had endured. The love he felt from the couple and his puppies filled his heart to overflowing, and he found himself letting go of any lingering fears. He knew now, without a doubt, that he was home. As the afternoon wore on, the woman picked up one of the puppies, cradling it close as she looked at the dog. "You're our family now," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "All of you. We'll always keep you safe." Hearing her words, the dog felt a warmth that went beyond physical comfort. It was the warmth of belonging, of knowing he had found a place where he was truly loved and valued. For so long, he had been a protector, a survivor, always on guard. But now, he could rest, knowing he was cherished not only for his loyalty, but simply for being who he was. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting a golden glow across the backyard as the family lingered together, soaking in the peacefulness of the evening. The puppies, tired from their play, curled up beside their father, their little bodies pressed close for warmth and comfort. The dog settled down, letting out a sigh of contentment as he nuzzled each of his pups, his heart brimming with love. The man and woman sat beside him, their hands resting on his back in a silent gesture of unity. In that moment, the dog understood something profound. He wasn't just their protector, he was part of something larger. A family bound by trust, kindness, and an unspoken promise of loyalty and love. As darkness fell and the stars began to peek through the night sky, the family moved inside, the puppies trailing sleepily behind. The house felt like a haven, filled with warmth and laughter, a place where love had turned strangers into family. And as the dog lay down beside his puppies that night, he felt the last remnants of his past fade away. The fear, the loneliness, the uncertainty, all of it was replaced by a deep, unshakable peace. He was no longer the dog abandoned in the woods, nor just a survivor. He was a beloved family member, cherished and at home. He closed his eyes, drifting into a deep sleep, secure in the knowledge that he and his puppies had found their forever family. And as he slept, his dreams were filled not with memories of survival, but with visions of warmth, joy, and the unbreakable bond he shared with the family that had saved him.